I am pleased to welcome Catherine McLaughlin to Townsquare Sunday. Ms. McLaughlin resides in Dartmouth. She's had a 40-year career as a professor of English and writing at UMass Dartmouth and Framingham State University. And she is now an author. She's written a gripping novel entitled Blue Collars, published by Spinner Publications, their first novel, and her first novel. Is that correct?
Yes.
The story is set in New Bedford, starting in the 50s and 60s. The novel paints wonderful and not so wonderful pictures of New Bedford during that time. It's a story of a young girl named Fiona Finn Kilroy, her loving family, and the terrible secret that she carried with her for many years. We'll talk about the book. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Being from New Bedford and growing up here, like you did, I really enjoyed your descriptions of New Bedford, from 2nd Street to the Orpheum Theater and the South End beaches and all of that. And you were able to do that because you lived it.
Exactly. I lived it, and I remembered it vividly.
What was special about that part of town?
There was
at that
there
time.
were a lot of most families were working class families. Didn't have a lot of extra money to spend. But we had in New Bedford proximity to the beaches, and they were free. We had the Poor Farm for ice skating. We had the 2 theaters on Water Street, the Royal and the Orpheum, which were not terribly expensive. And we had Lincoln Park, which was a great amusement park for kids who could not ever get to Six Flags or something like that.
That's right.
Or afford it.
Was Acushnet Park still operating at that time?
No, the last hurricane that took it out was Carol in '54.
Right. So that was unfortunately taken away.
Yes.
Blue Collars is the name of the book, and it takes us through history, both national and local. Urban renewal, the assassinations of John Kennedy, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Robert Kennedy, the Vietnam War. These things are all mentioned and a part of the thread of this book, if you will. And it's a story about one particular family, the Kilroy family. Is the Kilroy family very much different from the families that you
Oh, no,
grew up around?
they represent the neighborhood. They really do. It was a diverse neighborhood of a variety of immigrants, and most of the people worked in the mills, and their lives weren't easy, but you would never know it because they had this kind of optimism.
But there was a time, every once in a while, in real life and in this book, when that optimism was shattered for one reason or another.
Yes.
And the major theme of the story, I don't know if theme is the right word, but child sexual abuse is what this book is really about.
Yes.
Although the descriptions, as I've said, of New Bedford and all of the surrounding stuff are just wonderful, where Fiona, or Finn, was abused by an extended family member, and how she carried that pain with her for much of her life. It happened. She was quiet about it. She didn't tell her family until one day when she finally told her family. She called that later in the book, she called that the Big Inquisition.
Yes.
You want to read a portion of your book, I think.
Yeah, it was very difficult for Finn, who hardly knew how to express what she was feeling and what had happened to her. She's only 13 or 14. Her experience is too difficult for her to even put words to. But the thing that stays with someone who's been abused as a child, and I'd like to read this from Finn during this Inquisition, and the mother says, "Everything you told me is true. Is there anything else?" Finn says, "No." "Finn, why didn't you tell us?" Ah, there it was. The question, the accusation. I knew I was to blame. Into a terrible stillness, I finally said the truth as I knew it. I don't know. He told me not to. He said I'd get in trouble. And he was right. You should have told us, Ma said, and I knew I was in the deepest trouble I'd ever be in. My heart pounded. Tears of embarrassment and shame formed in my eyes.
And Finn, a survivor of sexual abuse, and as the book goes on, we learn more about how she felt about the Inquisition and the guilt that she carried around with her, and how she kind of went through that and got through it later on in life. Now, this didn't happen right away. It happened later on in life. You are a survivor of child sexual abuse.
I am.
And is that why you wrote the book?
It's a large reason that I wrote the book. I wanted to show, without being angry, without being recriminatory or writing a revenge book, I just wanted to show what a child goes through and the corrosive nature of secrecy. These things were not talked about. If children were warned, they were warned against strangers who smelled funny. They weren't warned about potential abuses from within the family. And this was unheard of. And people in those days had no place to turn, didn't know how to deal with Finn, didn't understand what the consequences would be. That would be a lifetime full of consequences.
Finn is a fictional character, but she is based on your experiences.
She is, yes.
Mm-hmm. And did you have the same experience with her as Finn became older and went off to study, went to Ireland, part of the story, and she met people, met a gentleman who she fell in love with? I don't think it much. Is that experience all part of your experience?
No.
No, okay.
No. Although I did study in Ireland.
Okay.
But that whole scene is purely fiction.
All right. When did you come to grips with this and say, hey, I'm not guilty, I'm a victim here? How did you do that?
I did it through a wonderful psychiatrist that I met in 1986 or 88. And I saw her for over 20 years, until she just retired last year. And it took that long to try to get it from my head to my heart that I was not guilty, that I was not a co-conspirator, as I had previously thought, and that I was worth something.
What is it that kept you going? You didn't quit?
No.
You didn't take your own life, as some folks sadly do in these kinds of situations. You kept going. What was it?
It was a drive to prove myself that I was worthy of something, to get validation. And I continued to get degrees, thinking one more degree would make me valuable, you know. It was partly that. It was partly that I had resources. I read. I threw myself into reading and writing and painting, which I still do today. And I don't know, children are resilient. They find ways.
That's true.
And it was the love of the family altogether, I think, that kept Finn from going over the edge.
All right. Now you're listening to Townsquare Sunday. My name is Jim Phillips, and I'm speaking with Catherine McLaughlin of Dartmouth, the author of a new novel called Blue Collars. In the novel, education was a priority for the Kilroys and other families. None of these folks were wealthy, yet education did remain a priority. Was it like, obviously it was like that in your family?
Oh, sure. It was a priority, and it was a way out. And at that time, state schools were affordable. You could work a part-time job and still pay your tuition, which has become impossible today, which is really unfortunate, because for a lot of poor people, that was their ticket out of poverty.
Yeah, and you're right. Today, you can work a part-time job, but you're going to still walk out with a tremendous debt.
Oh, yeah.
When you graduate. Take it from me, I know all about it.
Yeah, me too.
By writing this book, you are reaching out, in a way, to other survivors
I am.
Child sexual abuse. What's the message? What are you telling them now?
The message is to, A, don't blame yourself. don't allow secrecy to run your life. These people, these predators, were able to survive and to function as they did because of the secrecy around it. And there was nothing to stop them. So we have to eliminate that secrecy and the feeling of shame that the child has. And I highly recommend therapy for anybody who's been in an abusive situation.
In the book, the Kilroy family, after learning of this situation with Finn, they pondered what to do. They wrestled with this question because the predator was an extended family member who was close to people that they knew, who were ill. They didn't want to upset these people.
Right.
All these kinds of reasons. And so Finn's father talked to him and basically threatened him to stay away from his kids. But he was never prosecuted.
No.
He was never punished in any traditional way, if you will. And so is that a good way to handle it? I mean, I think today we would say no.
Today we would say no. Back in the 50s, it was such an embarrassment, a social embarrassment. It was so heinous that you were afraid people would have a stroke if you told them. It had to be kept secret, and they had nowhere to turn. No social services, no programs. They couldn't even go to the priest because they knew this predator, who was a pillar of the church. And they had nowhere to turn to for help. And I think that's changing and has changed in the last several years, but especially now with the Me Too movement.
And as you mentioned, there are a lot of organizations that are available to help victims and get them through the whole guilt part and blaming themselves and all of those things. It's a different world now.
It is.
Sadly, there are still predators. That hasn't changed. But it is a different world in terms of the help that's available and where people can go.
Yes.
Catherine McLaughlin, you have written a powerful book.
Thank you.
And you had, I'm sure you wanted to get it published. How did that all work? And how did Spinner get involved in getting this book published? Because Spinner just doesn't do books like this.
Exactly. I knew Joe Thomas, who runs Spinner, from high school. He was a year behind me, and his brother was in my class. We met one day by accident. I talked about Blue Collars that I had already been working on for several years, and he said, since it takes place in New Bedford, maybe we could back you on this. But nothing happened for another couple of years. We happened to get together again, and he asked to see the manuscript. So that's how they finally took it on. But altogether, it was 9 years in the making.
Were you ever once said, gee, maybe I shouldn't do this? Maybe this is too close to me in my experience? Did you ever once say that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was worried about it. I was worried about publishing it. But I decided I have a right to do that. And I don't owe anybody anything. So I think people should do it. It's very cathartic. It puts it out there. It gets it out of you and out there. And it was, I think, a worthwhile endeavor. I hope that there are people out there who can take away from this some hope as they see how Finn ends up in the book, how her adult life changes, and she comes to a point of forgiveness and redemption.
And we were talking before we turned the microphones on here, and you said this is not a revenge book.
No, it's not.
You're not looking to ambush anybody or make anybody feel, bring back all of that.
Right.
Yeah. Why is that important?
It's important because you need to approach this not from a hateful point of view, not from a revenge point of view, but the point of view of, okay, you've been through this experience. How do you deal with it? yourself. And hate is a very corrosive thing. So is revenge. I wanted to write about Finn's experience with as much honesty as I could. And I really want people to take away some hope from this. There is no place for revenge in this. There's only a place for compassion for what your parents went through, what the child goes through, and forgiveness.
How can people get their hands on this book?
It's going to be available in Barnes & Noble. It's available on Amazon. And you can come to one of my readings.
Yeah, be there.
Be there.
And there'll be a couple of readings. There's already been one this week. There'll be one July, downtown New Bedford.
Mm-hmm.
Watch for it. And one at the Howland Library in July as well, in the South End.
Yes.
Which maybe you put some people in there, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a website. The Spinner website is where people should go, right?
Yes.
All right. To find more information. Blue Collar is a heartwarming read, sometimes heart-wrenching, about a family's love for one another. It's a story of personal courage as well. Thank you, Catherine, for coming in, and the best of luck with this book.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
All right. That wraps up this week's Townsquare Sunday program. Thanks for tuning in. My thanks to production director Jason Kent and digital producer Casey Sylvia for their help in getting the program on the air and posted on our website, WBSM.com. I'm Jim Phillips. Have a great week and a wonderful Sunday.